Very good. So welcome everybody. And when the MC said she wanted to introduce who I am, and I'm always pay lots of attention to try and find out who I am. Because even recently I decided to apply for a Commonwealth of Australia seniors card. Not that I get any benefits from it, but just because I could. So when I went online, they said, no, you have to come in person to prove, your identity. Got identity fraud is a common problem these days. So that I had to go personally, and when I turned up in front of a counter, the woman said, very good, now can we see your driver's license? I said, I don't have a driver's license. And then they said, can we see your credit card? I don't have credit card. Your bank account? I don't have bank account. Your rental agreement? I don't have rental agreement. Your house mortgage or your ownership of a house? I don't have that either. And the next thing they asked for was my marriage certificate, which I certainly don't have. And everything they asked for, I didn't have. And so they said, well, I'm sorry, you don't exist. And I said, I always thought so. That's exactly what the Buddha said. But fortunately, I did have a passport and got dual nationality, so that meant I exist, but only just. So it's always interesting to try and find out who I am, or rather, who I'm not. But when it comes to the shortcut to Nibbana, there is a shortcut, a very short cut. It's called bald. So this is the shortcut to Nibbana. But of course, many people just want to, there's a few people, on the short path to Nibbana. But when it comes to people wanting to get shortcut to Nibbana, a lot of people don't know what they're doing. It's like getting on a bus, not knowing where the bus is going to go to, or going on an aircraft for a mystery tour. Do you really know what Nibbana is? So when you get there, will you be happy? And the reason I say that, because it's one of the reasons why I chose Buddhism. For many other different religions and paths, I did get a scholarship to a good school before I went to Cambridge. And that school had a chaplain. And so I remember one day going up to that chaplain to ask, well, what is God? What does it mean? Because I was not disrespectful, I just wanted to know as a young man. It was important. And because this was a chaplain, a priest which was ordained in the Anglican Church, I thought, well, he should know. So I asked him, and he said, well, God is ineffable. It's beyond words. It's the Alpha and Omega, like the A to Z. It is the ground of all being. It's the infinite. It's beyond words. I said, yes, but what is God? And I said, because everything you've told me, it just makes no sense. The Alpha to Omega, the A to Z, that sounds like a street directory of London, which we used to have in those days. There was so much else. They said, the ground of all being. I know what ground means, I know what being is, but what is the ground of all being? And as a young man, I wanted to have something a bit more understandable. I know even these days, I must admit, sometimes people criticize my talks because they're not deep enough. And sometimes the reason I always try to explain it so everyone can understand is that one day I remember just going to Buddhist talks when I was a layperson, and after the talk we'd all go out afterwards and say, that was really deep, that was profound. So did you understand any of it? No, but it was really deep and very profound. And so a lot of times it's a case that we misunderstand depth and profundity, for something which is really, what it really is just people don't understand what they're talking about. So anyway, then I managed to find a monk who could speak good English, and I asked him, Nibbana, what is Nirvana? And he said, Nirvana, it's ineffable, it's beyond words, it's the ground of all being, it's the infinite, it's... And I said, I've heard that somewhere before. You too don't know what you're talking about. So if you really understand what you're talking about, then at least you should be able to explain it to anybody, even a non-Buddhist. So, once we understand what nirvana is there a shortcut? There is a shortcut to nirvana, but do you want to take it? That's a difficult one. Because, in brief, that it's a saying from, this is not the sutras, but the closest you can get to the Buddha's words is called the commentaries from the Visuddhimagga. The path is, but no traveller on it is seen. Nibbana is, but not the person who enters Nibbana. Now what does that actually mean? First, well, just to go to the last part, that Nibbana is, but not the person who enters it. So you have to disappear. You have to let go, relinquish, give up. Not, your possessions and your money and something like that. No. Relinquish who you think you are. Relinquish your ego, your sense of self. That is one of the hardest things to abandon. So, before the path to letting go. How do we do that? The path is, but no traveller on it is seen. And somebody was asking me, even on the way here, they have read many of my books, they've gone to many retreats, and they haven't got anywhere in their meditation. And I think, oh my goodness, Ajahn Brahm is a bad teacher. Am I? Are you supposed to get somewhere in your meditation? Or is meditation not about getting somewhere, but actually getting nowhere? That's what you're supposed to do in meditation, getting nowhere. Because what does nowhere mean? It's a combination of now and here. Now plus here equals nowhere. So if you really are in the present moment and you're in this present space, then you are nowhere. So why do you want to get somewhere all the time? Is the place you already are, is that not good enough? Is the next place going to be somehow better? We spend our whole life trying to get somewhere. And when we get there, we find there's another place to get. And then there's another place. So, the shortcut to Nibbana is cutting off all comings and goings and just being. That is why I've just come from Hong Kong this morning. In Hong Kong, or especially when you go, to the central district and all these other important districts. Oh, it's so busy there. Is it? And all the 8 days I was in Hong Kong, I never, very rarely, saw any human beings. Very few human beings in Hong Kong. Human goings, yes. Human doing things, yes. But not human beings. They're always doing something, going somewhere, being something. But one thing I did find out, that I don't know if any of you can speak Cantonese, but the word for good or okay is ho ho. Ho ho, ho ho, yeah. Ho ho, yeah. So that's where I really found out that's where Santa Claus comes from. He doesn't come from Norway or Lapland or somewhere. He doesn't come from the North Pole. He comes from North Point, which is a district in Hong Kong where actually I was staying. But anyway, that being aside, why is it that people always want to go somewhere or do something or get something, and they think that is going to get them to Nibbana? When I get there, then I will be free. When I get rid of this, then I'll be at peace. Nibbana is obviously one idea of what Nibbana is peace. Deep peace. Really amazing peace. So how can you be peaceful if you're trying to be peaceful? If you can let go of all trying, then maybe you could be peaceful. The path is, but no traveler on it is seen. So the shortcut to Nibbana is not traveling. It's not a shortcut. It's a short being here. But if you try being here, you will find that it's more difficult than you expect. One of the wonderful stories about Nibbana and how difficult it was for even gifted meditators and people with enormous faith, people who even did cut their hair off. The Buddha's chief attendant, Ananda. So, what was his story of how he became enlightened? Many of you know that story, and many of you have tried that method many times. For those of you who do not know the Ananda method, he was the disciple of the Buddha. He listened to the Buddha again and again and again. And he would witness many monks and nuns come up to the Buddha's presence and to listen to all of these amazing experiences they had. And the Buddha just announcing that this monk was enlightened, that nun was enlightened. And it was so inspiring, except Ananda wasn't enlightened at all. So you can imagine what it must be like. After all those years of everyone else becoming enlightened, the Buddha was about to pass away. And Ananda thought, now the Buddha's passed away. What hope is there for me? I couldn't get enlightened when the Buddha was sitting right next to me. Now there's no chance when he's dead and gone and no teacher, no inspiration anymore. So he got quite depressed. But, yes, exactly, about 2 or 3 months after the Buddha passed away, more like 5 months, they decided to have a big conference, a big meeting together with 499 fully enlightened beings, plus Ananda. And if ever you've been invited to a big conference and there are professors and PhDs and experts, except for you. If you have been a member of the Buddhist fellowship for so many years and all these other people have become enlightened, but not you, that would be so difficult to accept. But Ananda decided to give it one more try. One huge effort. One big last, give it everything. What many people say these days, enlightenment or bust. So he meditated all night, giving it everything he could. Full effort, not giving in to aches and pains, sitting and sitting and sitting, and when the dawn came up, bust. He wasn't enlightened at all, not even close. So what did he do? He thought, there's another hour or two before the meeting starts, so I will go and take a nap. So he went to his room and he lay down, and before the head hit the pillow, he was fully enlightened. The 500th Arahat. So if you're not enlightened yet, the shortcut to Nibbana is go to bed. And before your head hits the pillow, see what happens. You probably won't get enlightened, but according to probability theory, just like a lottery, the more tickets you buy, the more likelihood there is of you winning the lottery. Isn't that the case? Probability theory. So the more times you lay down and hit your head on the pillow. But of course, that's not what it meant. The point was, Ananda was letting go. Stop trying. He gave up. His ego wanting to attain something had been abandoned. Nibbana is, but not the monk or the nun or the Ananda or the anyone who enters it. You have to relinquish your sense of self if you really want to go all the way. But that's a hard thing to do. So there is a way of letting go of who you think you are, or who you believe you are, which is why I started the story on my identity crisis, trying to get a Commonwealth Australia Seniors card. Found out it's very hard to prove you exist. What ID have you got? I'm not talking about your passports or your driving license or your marriage certificate. What ID have you got in this life? Who do you think you are? If you start thinking like that, you just spend your whole life thinking and philosophizing. And that's one of the reasons why thought can only take you so far. But there's more to be done than just thinking. Thinking is what we do when we go around things. We think about something. Just like a satellite orbits the planet or the sun. It goes round and round and round. But to be able to actually to penetrate, to go into something, we stop the thoughts and we go inside. When you stop thinking who you are, it's scary, because there's many things who you assumed you were now make no sense. It disappears. Which is one of the reasons why that the shortcut to Nibbana is an art of disappearing, of letting go. And what does that mean, letting go? First of all, the volunteers. The volunteers who just give, expecting nothing back in return. In the Dharma we call that chaga. If you give expecting something, you make a big donation and you get your name written on the monastery hall. This is, who am I going to, no, I better not say anybody. Okay, this is Oliver Hall, because Oliver donated some funds for it. That is not donation. To me, that is buying advertising rights for your ego. You may give a lot of money, but it's just advertising rights. But the best donors are those who give, and no one knows they gave anything at all. They give, expecting nothing back in return. And it's not cash. It's their time. Giving, even though they're tired and they've been working all day, and the volunteers come and they help and they serve and they look after, they give. They expect nothing. But when you let go of your ego and self by actually giving your time, giving your kindness, giving your forgiveness, you are letting go of your ego, your sense of self, what you want for somebody else. That is why volunteers, they are the ones who are on the shortcut to Nibbana, because their ego is vanishing. It's like the simile of the 5 fingers on a hand. Do you remember that simile? 5 fingers. Which finger is the most important? Which member of the Buddhist fellowship is the most important? Is it the president? Imagine the 5 fingers on the hand. This finger said, I am the most important. I am the strongest. I am the opposable thumb. I may be short, but I'm strong. And when you say, okay, which finger do you put up? Me. I'm the okay finger. And this one said, no, I am the most important. Why? because I am the finger of wisdom. The index finger, I point out to people, where the water is and where the empty seats are. And wisdom is so important. So I am the best finger. And then this one said, I am the most important finger. I am certainly the most powerful, because if you put me up the other way, you will see how powerful I am. But more than that, I'm the tallest, I see furthest, and I'm also the middle finger. And the middle way is the best way according to Buddhism. And then the fourth finger, she put her finger up and said, I am the most important. I am the finger of love. When you get engaged, the ring goes on me. When you get married, I get the wedding ring. I am the finger of love. And without love, where would this world be? I'll tell you where you will be. You'll all be monks and and that left the most insignificant finger, the little finger, who everyone thought was not important at all. And that little finger said, yes, even though you use me to do dirty things. I am the most important finger. Why? Because when you pay respects to the Buddha, not Buddha here anyway, I am always closest to the Buddha. That's why the little finger is the most important. So it was just, when you give, sometimes it's the people who clean up afterwards, who do all the dirty work, who no one knows who they are. They are sometimes the most important. They're lessening their ego, but they're doing a lot of really good work. It's called giving, expecting nothing back in return. It's letting go of things. Sometimes we say, what do you mean by letting go? They have another word called in Pali called anallaya. The alaya that's a word which you may recognize from the compound Himalaya, the mountains. That is where the snow, the Hima, rests, finds a footing, settles. Meghalaya in North India, the land of the clouds. Alaya is a place where something settles. Analaya is actually where nothing settles. Analaya, nothing settles at all. What do we mean by that as a shortcut to Nibbana? Someone praises you, and next day they criticize you. Can you let that go? It's one of the reasons why the Buddha gave the simile of the lotus flower. Someone comes along, you may go to work tomorrow morning, and they criticize you, they tell you off, they say terrible things you've done. That is like somebody urinating on a lotus flower. If you urinate on a lotus flower, all that urine just falls off, and none of it settles and sticks on the lotus. Which means afterwards, the lotus still smells like a beautiful lotus flower. It does not smell like a toilet. And then somebody pours Chanel No. 5 over the lotus. You know, it's amazing that Chanel number 5 is still popular. You know why I know what the most popular perfumes are? Because these days you have to walk through airports. Whatever airport you tend to walk through these days is a shopping mall before you even get to the gate to depart. And even I noticed there's one perfume called Samsara perfume. I thought that's very apt to call it Samsara perfume. But anyway, there we are. You pour samsara perfume just over the lotus. And what happens? Nothing sticks. It doesn't settle. So afterwards it all falls off. And it still smells just like a lotus. Nothing sticks to it. And that was the wonderful simile of praise and blame, wonderful experiences in the past, or terrible experiences in the past. Nothing sticks. You're letting go. Nothing is kept. Can you do that? It's actually a scary thing to do. Or sometimes people like to get rid of all of their disappointments in the past, but letting go of all your achievements in the past. I was telling somebody recently that when I first went to visit my mother in UK, she had my degree certificates. BA and MA. I know that some monks have got 2 MAs, which is why we call them Mama. But I had because it's weird in Cambridge, even though it's science, they still call it, they don't have Bachelor of Science, it's all BAs. So anyway, when I got my 2 certificates, I thought, I'm a monk, I don't need these, I'll let these go. So you know what I did? I tore them up into shreds and put them in the trash can. And then my mother, she just looked at me, never said a word. But then I went to, I think, my room to meditate. When I came out, she had all the bits on the kitchen table, putting them together and gluing them all back together again. And I felt so terrible. Stupid, arrogant monk trying to be enlightened for myself. I don't care about these pieces of paper, but not realizing that other people did, especially your mother. I felt terrible about that. So, you can let it go yourself, but other people, it's important to them. So even letting go, it's not personal. What do other people require from you? So anyway, when you let go of past and future, especially the past, who are you? If you ask yourself who you are, already in the introduction, they gave a quick history of all those where I was ordained, where I went to university, you know, the degrees you got. And if anybody asked me about deep theoretical physics now, I probably would forget it all. I wouldn't pass my degree now. Time has passed, and I have to let it go too. Even, where were you born? That doesn't define you. My mother said I was born in Middlesex, but I don't know. Was I? I'm only taking my mother and father's word for it. But that when we let go of who we think we are, what happens when we don't identify with a race, a country, a background, a education, a all the pain of the past, the successes of the past? Are those really who you are? And interesting piece of psychology. There was at a grief and loss conference where I went some years ago, that one of the people who was listening was a celebrity griever. She was the mother of what they call the Claremont serial killer victim. Now, apparently they've arrested somebody in Australia, but he hasn't been to trial yet. But when I was talking to her about how to let go of grief and loss to somebody you loved very, very much, I gave some really good advice. I'm not going to repeat it here, that's another talk. But I gave some really good advice on how to let go of the pain of losing somebody, your daughter, to a murderer. And afterwards she came up to me, and nose to nose, she was so angry at me. "What right have you," she said, "to take away my grief?" It was one of the first times you saw how we get attached, make our identity even around painful things. Being a well-known celebrity griever meant that she did have a lot of sympathy, a lot of entry into many organizations. It was who she was, and it made her somebody. And if I took away her grief, if she followed the advice, which does work, then she would not be grieving anymore, and she'd be a nobody. Which is one of the reasons why that we make identities, egos, sense of self, not only just out of achievements, but also out of tragedies as well, out of pain. Which is one of the reasons why that people who do have a very, very difficult past, the victims, it's very hard for them to let go of their victimhood. It's who they are. But anyway, if you want the shortcut to Nibbana, we have to let go of everything. Every part of your history, who you thought you were, to let that go and go deep, 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 deep. So as we do that, we always find that just the shortcut to Nibbana, the path is, but no traveller on it is seen. No person, no history, no baggage. So, can you do that? This is one of the reasons why the shortcut to Nibbana is just the learning how to, basically the old Eightfold path. In brief, just at least opening up to the suggestion, there's no one in here. Opening up to that suggestion. And then, when there's nothing in it for you, then you can let go. You can not want to get stuff, but instead to serve. That second factor of the Eightfold Path, make peace, otherwise known as let go. It's called Nekama Sankappa, renunciation, letting go, being kind, being gentle, Avayapada and Ahimsaka. I'm doing this because there's meditation teachers here. It's the motivation, where you're coming from, to be able to let go. What is being kind? Being kind, the definition or the explanation which I often give coming from my father and just building on it, to open the door of your heart to this moment, to who you are, to what you think you are in this moment, always changing, to let this moment be. Open the door of your heart is kindness, gentleness, letting go. And from that we get all of our morality, all of our precepts, all of our virtue. Well, there's nothing in it for me, it's just giving and being kind. You can't break precepts. Virtue becomes natural. And all the other factors of this way all comes when we let go, we restrain, which is another form of letting go. We realize the beauty of simplicity. Not having stuff, but giving away stuff. Small houses, small apartments, small cars. In Singapore, the small vehicles can find a parking place more easily. That's why I like the Hinayana. Small vehicle costs less in fuel. It's environmentally far less of a threat to climate change. But just being small and tiny, having small footprint on this, that's one of the reasons I always travel in a car or in an aircraft, so I don't leave many footprints. Okay, that never went down well. But I think you got that, the climate footprint. But sometimes you come to a place like Singapore, you go to Australia. Why do people have such big houses? And such flash cars? And such expensive clothes? Why? It's just to say that you've arrived, baby. You've arrived. Have you? So it's small stuff, letting go. That's the path to Nibbana. So a lot of times people don't know how wealthy or how poor you are. The path is, but you let go, give up. I often say that one of the most amazing donations which we ever got, which started off our nuns' monastery for bhikkhunis. You all know that, I worked very hard and sacrificed, got into trouble by giving ordination, full ordination to women so they could live, obviously, as bhikkhunis, fully ordained nuns. But it's not just giving ordination, they needed a place to stay. And what happened was that trying to raise some funds for a monastery for the bhikkhunis, not for me, it was more problems for me. I never got anything out of this except expelled. But that one day this man came, and I never forget the amazing generosity of this gentleman. He was Australian, he came in Australian national dress. Do you know Australian national dress? It is thongs, it is shorts, and a dirty singlet. It's called Australian national dress. And anyway, that he came up, and he came out of an old car, a beat-up old car, and he said to me that his wife had just given birth to his first child. It was a girl. And he was a Buddhist, he said. And he said, I hear you're collecting donations to build a monastery for women. So yeah. So I want to make a contribution. So that if my daughter, when she grows up, wants to become a nun, that she can. I doubt if she'd ever want to, but I want her to have that opportunity. So he gave me a check for $250,000. And he drove away in his old car, and I never saw him again. That was generosity. He didn't look like a rich man. He didn't ask for a receipt. He just vanished. And the check never bounced. Sometimes I try that. Sometimes if people give me a check, I just drop it on the floor. And one day I did that just for a joke, and it actually did bounce. It was on a sort of a mattress or a cushion, and then it bounced up again. And I thought, this is a bad sign. And it actually did bounce afterwards. It's really some weird psychic stuff sometimes goes on, but anyway. So, then, when you start to let go of stuff, you live very simply. It's very easy to be peaceful. One of the biggest problems for people who try to meditate is that they try to meditate. They try to meditate. They're still doing stuff. They're trying to get something. And if they get something, that's more attachments. That's more things to own. So, attachment, holding on. My hand is holding on to this clock. So put it down, stop it. And then I go and pick up something else. Stop it. Pick up something else. Stop it. Doesn't matter how many times you let go of the object of your attachment. You're not realizing that you're going to attach to something else next. There are two ends to attachment. There's a thing you're grasping onto, and there's a thing which is doing the grasping. My hand. And I can let go all my life. Put it down, Ajahn Brahm. Put this down, put that down. But you find that you'll still pick up something afterwards. When I became a monk, I had to let go of girls. And then as soon as I started becoming a monk, then I was attached to food. So you give up food, then you start thinking fantasy. You give up fantasy, and you start picking up something else. You're always picking up something. Why? It's not what you pick up, it's the thing doing the picking up. So the simile is, if you want to stop, this is only a simile, if you want to be free of attachments, you've got to cut off your hand. As long as you've got a hand, you'll pick things up. And I thought that was a really neat, cool, original Ajahn Brahm simile, until I found it in the suttas, the simile of the hand from the Lord Buddha. How can you cut off your hand? Cut off your sense of self, who wants to attain things and get something and be somebody and be enlightened. So this is the toughest thing to do, to let go of the sense of me and mine and a being. Fortunately, there's a very short path to that. It's called meditation, which leads to such a deep state of stillness that you disappear. You vanish. You're gone. That is, as you all know, this is coming, that is the jhanas. The eighth factor of the Eightfold Path. It just creeps up on you. And don't think that that is beyond you. It actually happens to people. Just like the story of Ananda, there was a story of this other girl who's actually a nun at Dharmasara now. But I won't say who she is, but she was on one of those retreats, meditating and meditating and meditating and meditating and meditating and meditating and getting nowhere. And at the end of one of those retreats, after 8 or 9 days, getting nowhere. So what did she do? We finished off the retreat and her taxi wasn't going to come for another hour. So what did she do? She meditated to kill time. That's what she told me. Nothing else to do, just waiting for a taxi. She'd been meditating for such a long time, nothing was working, so I might as well just sit down and kill time. And that was after she came out of her meditation. She was kneeling on the floor and she said to me, "Oh, oh, 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 Ajahn, Brahm, oh, oh, oh." I don't know if I would make it as an actor, probably not, but it gives you some idea of just the emotional afterglow after really powerful deep meditation. Because she'd given up and stopped trying, things started to happen. When she least expected it, when she stopped training, aspiring, trying, doing something, like Ananda, that is when things happened. My best simile, many of you have heard this, but this isn't original. That is of the donkey and the durian. I do change that when I go from country to country. Here I use durian. In Australia I may use carrot. If it's in UK, I use like a packet of fish and chips. Or whatever people like to eat. A donkey, usually a donkey and a carrot. The donkey is the most stubborn animal in the world. You can beat it, but it still won't pull any carts. So you don't use a stick to beat the donkey, you tie the stick to the back of the donkey's neck. So the front of the stick is 2 foot in front of the donkey, and you tie a string to the end of the stick, and a carrot, or if it's in Singapore, a durian, on the end of the stick. And if the Singapore donkey likes the durian, the donkey will move towards the durian trying to catch it. Like many meditators, they move towards the jhana, they move towards Nibbana, trying to catch Nibbana. They move towards it, and what happens? When they move, the durian moves. The donkey starts running after the durian, and the durian is still 2 foot in front of the donkey's face. No matter how hard the donkey runs, the durian is still 2 foot in front. So, how does a donkey ever catch the durian? How does anyone ever get enlightened? The donkey overhears somebody talking about meditation. So what does the donkey do? The donkey stops, but it needs faith. That's one of the problems with people. People just don't have faith and patience these days. Even just yesterday, somebody asked me the question about what does patience mean in Buddhism? It's in Hong Kong. And I said, well, I'll tell you the next time I come. I didn't appreciate that answer. But the donkey waits. And what happens when you let go? When you stop trying? That durian goes further away from the donkey. Further away, never been that far before. That's one of the problems when people let go. They think it's not working, so they go and do something again. They're not patient enough. You want too much of a shortcut. This is the shortcut. It's not as short as you think, but it's short enough. So you're patient. And the carrot, or the durian, so further away than it's ever been before. And the donkey just sits there, nice and patient, just like, a good Buddhist, just sitting there, equanimous, just waiting, being in the moment, not wanting anything in the whole world. And then soon, the durian starts swinging towards the donkey. And before it knows it, the durian is 2 foot in front of the donkey's mouth, as it normally is. But this time it's coming really fast towards the donkey's mouth. It comes so close to the donkey's mouth that the donkey has to remember the last instructions of the Buddha, the great compassion of the Buddha. The donkey has to remember to say, durian, as it comes right close to its teeth, durian, the door of my mouth is open to you. Otherwise, you've seen the big teeth which donkeys have, otherwise it bounces off its big front teeth and it misses it. That is how donkeys catch durians. That is the shortcut to enlightenment. You've been rushing after enlightenment. Now you've got to stop and wait for it to come to you. If you want to get the deep meditations, you have to wait still until it comes to you. Chase after it, and you chase it away. Or Ajahn Chah's great simile. Many of you, when you say these similes, especially first of all, you think, oh, this is crazy, this is not Buddhism, this doesn't work. And that's exactly how I regarded Ajahn Chah's simile. I thought he was one crazy monk. I didn't believe him at all. It didn't make any sense to me. But I remembered it because it was so profound. Until many years later, just what a great simile that was. And that was the simile of the mango orchard. He said that his monastery, Wat Pah Pong, this was many years ago, was a mango orchard where the mango trees were planted by the Buddha himself. I said, this is madness, crazy. The Buddha never came to northeast Thailand. If he did, any mango trees would be long dead by now. And he said, these mango trees are now full of ripe and juicy mangoes. But he said, if you try and shake that tree to get a mango, nothing will fall. If you climb the tree, you'll never be able to climb high enough. If you throw sticks up at the tree, you'll always miss the mangoes. If you try and find a ladder, the ladder will not be high enough to reach. There's only one way to get the mangoes from the trees planted by the Buddha. And that is, you have to sit perfectly still, not moving, under the mango tree. Hold out your hand, and a mango will fall. You see, that's crazy talk. Have you got mangoes in Singapore? You sit under a mango tree. How long would you have to sit before a mango fell? And even if it did fall, it'll probably fall on your head instead of in your hand. So, crazy talk. But when you understand the simile, perfect. If you shake the Bodhi tree, trying to get enlightenment, you'll never get anything for. You try and climb it, try and get a ladder to go up it, nothing falls. Still, perfectly still, until nothing moves. Just like the donkey, the carrot comes towards you. To be perfectly still, shouldn't that be easy? You have to get rid, or at least somehow put aside the sense of self, the doer, the will, that which does and stops you being still. If you have a will and a choice, you'll always be interfering and doing stuff. That is why letting go, being still, means the doer what you take to be yourself settles down. Even in Cambridge, in the philosophy department, rather on the outside, on the walls of the philosophy department in Cambridge, when I was a student there, I actually saw this with my own eyes, graffiti. The first line of the graffiti was a quote from René Descartes, the French philosopher, who said, "To do is to be." And underneath that, Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist. He turned it upside down. Not to do is to be, but to be is to do. And underneath that, summed up by the contemporary American philosopher, Frank Sinatra, do, be, do, be, do. And that wasn't just a joke. It was saying and pointing out the connection between doing and your sense of being and self. You are what you do. I'm a monk, so that's my name. I'm a monk because I do monk business. I do monk stuff. Maybe a pilot here because you do pilot stuff. You are a mother because you do mothering. How much of our being is taken up by what we do? Imagine that you stop doing stuff. Just in meditation, you sit perfectly still. Don't do anything. You're not a searcher after truth. You don't even think. You are just being. It's one of the reasons it's hard to be still, because you have to let go of everything you think you are to be really still. You have to vanish. The path is, but no traveller on it is seen. Fortunately, the less you do, the happier you feel. You get this beautiful sense of joy. The piti sukha which comes up as a chitta sankhara with your breathing or anything else. This is a mind getting powerful because it's not wasting its energy doing stuff until you become very happy. The less you do, the more the bliss. That is almost like the payoff for disappearing. You bliss out. So it's scary. It is like I was saying to someone in Hong Kong in a retreat, when, am I running out of time? Oh yes. When you start to get very still and your body starts to vanish, that your sight, your hearing, your smell, your taste, your physical touch, that's scary. Who you think you are is disappearing. Your sense of safety, because these are the alarm systems which we have, especially sound, in case somebody's creeping up on us. They're scary, but it's so blissful. So it's a trade-off. You going to places you've never been before, or rather, you disappearing. But that's just too much fun. So what happens is the art of disappearing, useless, your body vanishes. You're just left with the sixth sense, the mind. And then that starts to vanish. Your will goes. And so much else goes. What's the point of this? When you experience things disappearing, vanishing, this is what enlightenment means, what Nibbana means. Nibbana, cessation, disappearance, things stopping, going. In the Ratana Sutta, the Buddha said, it's Nibbanti Dira Yatayang Padipa. This light, this oil lamp, just goes out. Just like when the wind blows out the flame. And the word for cessation going out in Nibbanas. It finishes, stops. Is that scary? For many people it is. But the closer you get to disappearing, the more you let go, the more bliss it truly is. That's why this is the great vanishing act. It's one of the reasons why I wrote that book, The Art of Disappearing. And that was a very well-read book, especially from that fellow in Malaysia, J. Lo. He read that book, and now no one can find him. Okay. I think my hour is up, and during that talk, I said some stupid things, some banal things, but also some very powerful things as well. It was a mixture, because as I was giving that talk, I was looking at you. Sometimes I'd lost you, went too deep. So I came back with a little joke, and then went deeper again, and then a joke, to see how many of you I could take with me in the shortcut to enlightenment. Okay, so thank you for listening, and thank you for not disappearing. By which I mean going out of the door. So, who's gonna to have the first challenge? Ask the tough questions. Already got a few probably. Yeah, go on.
Okay, just to kickstart, Ajahn Brahm, I already have 2 questions with me.
Excellent.
That was sent in earlier. So the first question would be, how would I know which aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path which I have yet to develop properly? Is there any way for us to get feedback?
If you're still trying to develop the Eightfold Path, see if you can stop. Don't develop things, just let go of things. Don't try and get more attainments. This is Ajahn Chah's, one of his sayings to us. We practice not to attain things, but to get rid of things. To let go of things. So, what haven't you let go of yet? Check that out.
Thank you. There's another question that we have here sent in was, how do we see self in practice and let go of self totally?
The only way to let go of your sense of self is, who do you take yourself to be? Try that first of all. Not who are you, because that assumes that you are something. But see if you can, what do you take yourself to be? Am I a monk? Am I a man? Am I an Ang Mo or a Kwai Lo? Or Pule? Pule monk, is that correct? Indonesian, yeah. Who are you? And it's great, who do I take myself to be? When you start to disappear, you can be anything, wherever you want to be. You have much more fun, like you're a chameleon. You know, you can take on many different forms for convenience. So you're not anything. So this is how we take on ourselves in practice. So number one, don't look at trying to get more attainments. If you try and get some things, you'll always be tense. So, and how do we, what's the other one? How do we let go of the self? Or how do we let go of the self? The only way you can let go of the self is by stillness and happiness. Stillness. This is one of the reasons why. And it's not just because of, it was taught by Ajahn Chah. This is from the Pali, from the Sanskrit, just from everything. It's actually learning. It's not concentration. Concentration is what you do. Stillness is what happens when you let go, when you disappear. We leave things alone. You know the simile? I think many of you have seen this before, but I'll do it very quickly. How do I get this water to be perfectly still? Has it stopped moving yet? Actually, you're the MC. Come here. Has it stopped moving yet?
No.
Why? Because I'm not being mindful. I'll be mindful. Has it stopped moving yet? Because I'm not concentrating. I'm now concentrating and be mindful. This is not the way to find stillness. You will never be able to hold a glass of water perfectly still, no matter how long and how you concentrate. There's only one way to get this water to be perfectly still, which is put it down, yes. Let go. Stop grasping it. Stop attaching to it. Put it down. Let it go. And it's still moving. And be patient. And after a short while, that water will be more still than I could ever hold it. It can remain still for hours. So it's this stillness come from letting go. So that's actually how we learn to be still. Let go. Okay.
Thank you. The third question, is it necessary to get into jhana through meditation to arrive at Nibbana?
Yes, the Buddha said that many, many times. If you want to find out the clearest saying, is that this was in the Mahamulukyaputta Sutta, number 64, Majjhima Nikaya. You know, sometimes I don't quote suttas. I leave that for Ajahn Brahmali. I tell the jokes. But I don't know my suttas. I taught him Pali and suttas. But Mahamulukyaputta Sutta, number 64, just like you cannot get to the heartwood, to the pith of a tree without first going through the bark and the sapwood. So you cannot get to Nibbana without first going through. What actually the bark is the faith, the confidence, and the sapwood is the the virtue. So the virtue and the restraint. That's the only way to get. The bark and the bark was the virtue. The sapwood was the meditation, the jhanas. That's the only way you can get to the pith. And the Buddha said in the same simile, the only way you can get to Nibbana is through those jhanas. And it's obvious. Why not? It's not you getting through. This is just you're disappearing. That's what the jhanas are like. In the jhanas, number one, the five senses stopped. That's one of the great signs. You can't hear, you can't see, you can't smell, taste, or physical touch. Five senses have stopped. That's why sometimes it's scary for people, but you're very safe. And in the next jhana, the second jhana, your will has gone. That's why it's also really scary, but it's blissful. Not having a body, having to come back again to the body. So that you see experiencing. Can I tell the tadpole and the frog simile? Whether you say yes or no, I'm going to tell it anyway. Tadpole and the frog. Little tadpole, born in the water, lived all its life in the water, went to school in the water, went to university in the water, studied Abhidhamma in the water, learned everything about water, but how could little tadpole know anything what water really was? Because she lived all her life in the water. Could not know water no more than a fish could. But one day, little tadpole, she grows arms and legs. She becomes a frog. And one day a little frog, not knowing what she was doing, jumps out of the pond. When she jumps out of the pond, it's something very different than what she'd ever experienced before. Dry land. Now, only now, can she understand what water is, or rather what water was. That strange stuff which was always there, but which is now vanished. There's so much about our world, our life, that we don't notice, because it's always been there for us. But when it goes, wow, that was actually wonderful. It went, our five senses, the pain, our will, which people cherish as one of their most basic possessions, your freedom to choose. Any psychologist knows it's not a freedom, but we believe it's we who make those choices. Once the will stops, disappears, not because you want it to stop, it's just not there anymore. Then you can understand what the will, Chaitanya, choice. And that's scary to think about, but it's wonderful to realize. You have the data for insight. How can you ever know what the five senses are, or the will is, when it hasn't disappeared? In theory, yeah. Experience, no. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn, for answering the first three questions. The next question is, some Ajahns in the forest tradition teach that the mind is eternal, like a soul. This may lead one to clinging on to the mind as self. So how do you reconcile it with anatta and letting go?
You can't reconcile it. It's not how the Buddha taught. It's so clear. And it's what would be left? The mind, an eternal mind? A mind has to have an object. A mind is not just some ephemeral thing. A mind has to know something. That's even what the Buddha said. Consciousness has to have an object of consciousness. Just like the two sheaves of reeds, using the metaphor from the agricultural society of those days. To dry the straw after the harvest, you'd get the sheaf of reed, another sheaf of reed, and balance them against each other so that they could dry. If you take one of those sheaves away, the other one would fall. You can't have knowing without knowing something. And if you know something, if it's always the same, it will just vanish, and the mind will disappear as well. The mind is not a constant. It is anicca, subject to coming and going. It is dukkha. That's a hard one for people to accept. That to know is to suffer. That's what the Buddha said. If you can see the mind disappearing, all the consciousness vanishing, then you'd understand what freedom truly is. I'm just going for broke this evening. I'm just teaching Deep Dhamma. The last time I taught Deep Dhamma here in Singapore was when I first came here, when the president of the time, remember Sun Han? Yeah, because after a couple of talks of just the two bad bricks and opening the door of your heart, all the nice, soft, fluffy, cuddly talks, he said, "Can you please give me a deep talk?" I said, "You really want one?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So I gave him one, really deep talk about anatta and no will and disappearing. And the next day when he picked me up for breakfast, he said, "Don't ever do that again, Ajahn Brahm." Because he trusted me enough to know I knew what I was talking about. And he never slept that night. He wasn't ready for the deep talk. Just like I could never understand Ajahn Chah at first. I thought this nonsense. And even you might see in the teachings of the Buddha, sometimes you teach a talk on non-self, or you disappearing, and people get afraid. I mean, really afraid. Taking away your deepest fear. You know that sometimes the deepest fear, I remember in Christianity, was the devil coming to take over your mind, to sell your soul. If the devil came and wanted to buy my soul, it would be a very good deal. I could get a lot of donations for the Buddhist fellowship, and the devil will get nothing at all. There's no one in here. Okay, a few people got that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So probably this leads to the next question about how can I achieve my dreams if I were to just let go of it? Because there won't be any direction in life then.
The direction is not going out there. How many goals have you had in life? And once you get them, if you do get them, number one, they're not exactly what you want. Look, I do many marriage blessings, and I never forget doing a marriage blessing for this lovely woman I knew for such a long time. And at the marriage, she said, "This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Is this it?" She said that was her goal, her aspiration, her dream. And when she met her dream, then it was very disappointing. It was not exactly as they said in the marketing campaign for marriage. So, what are you dreaming of? What do you want? There is one of those old curses which a man from the Middle East once told me. The two curses, the worst curses, Middle Eastern, and I meant the first one is a bit of a gross one, but it's funny. The second worst curse is to tell someone, "May the fleas of 1,000 camels infest your armpits." But don't tell that to your wife, please, or your husband, or your boss. But worse than that was the refined one. And I thought, how cool this is. The worst curse is, may you get everything you want as soon as you want it, immediately. It's a curse. All your dreams, as soon as you dream them, they're there right away. It takes away the pleasure of the chase, the happiness of what we take to be happiness of striving, the stretching yourself for something more. I think if you had that wish and you could do that, whatever you wanted, it was there straight away. I think you want to commit suicide. Life would lose a lot of its meaning. Leave that for you to contemplate. Getting what you want as soon as you want it. What would that be like?
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. So, the next two questions are shorter and they're on meditation as well. So the first one is, can lay people like us get into jhanas?
Yes.
I hope that answers whoever who posted this question. Yeah, this is an open-ended, it's a closed-ended question, right? Okay. The next one is, if meditation makes one disappear, so why would one want to continue living?
Because you've got no choice. The wood is not up to you. It's an interesting that once you understand what stillness is, and just how blissful it is, when the will just about vanishes. You can imagine the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, freshly enlightened. And I was a skeptic, a physicist. They said that the Buddha, even with his eyes open, just stared at the Bodhi tree for 7 days. Is that possible? Yes. because the will gets so still, nothing moves. And after the Buddha was sitting still for about 7 weeks, I think, in all, or something, I'm not quite sure, but then it was Brahma-Sahampati. Brahma-Sahampati was an anagami, a non-returner, from the Sudawasa realm, who came to congratulate his friend because they were both monks together under the previous Buddha, Kassapa. If you look at the whole stories of Sahampati, and he came because he knew that this was his friend. They were monks together under Kassapa. This is from the suttas. And he said to the newly enlightened Buddha, first of all, congratulations, please teach the Dhamma for others. There are beings with little dust in their eyes. Please teach out of compassion. When the will has been so calmed down, you can't start it up again yourself. You do need someone, something, a little spark, someone asking you to teach. Then the Buddha started his teaching career. As far as I understand, if Sahampati had not come to ask the Gautama Buddha to teach, the Gautama Buddha would have been Pacceka Buddha, the silent Buddha. The will had been so calmed down, so still, frozen. It's something just to get it going again. Out of compassion to teach for other beings. And when I recently went to Thailand to teach a retreat, the pollution levels were so high, I thought of not going over there. But when the pollution level lessened, I thought, well, there's not so much pollution there now, so I can teach because beings didn't have so much dust in their eyes. Oh, come on, you could see that coming.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask Ajahn 3 more questions, okay? Yeah. So one sent in, sometimes when I look in and see that there is nothing permanent that I can hold on or cling to, fear arises. So how do I overcome this fear and then move on in my practice?
How you overcome that fear? You don't overcome that fear. Joy, happiness overcomes the fear. Freedom overcomes the fear. Are you afraid of death? People say they're not. but actually you don't really know until actually death faces you. But see if you can find that BBC documentary of, I was trying to find it somewhere, I don't know actually where to look for it, but BBC documentary, near-death experiences about this old English woman who, died on the operating table, and when she went out of her body, that she felt so free and happy. And when she met the spirit said, I'm sorry, but you're not supposed to die yet, go back. And she said, no, I'm not going back, but you have to. I refuse. Well, you must. You try and make me. I'm not going. So she was this old, dead English lady with lots of attitude, and she refused to go back. And they had this big argument on the psychic plane until the spirit took hold of her and threw her back in her body. And when she was interviewed by the BBC, and she told what had happened, and then what she was going to do to that spirit when she died properly the next time, the things she was going to do to him, she was so upset and angry, sending her back into this old body. What it meant was, sometimes we are afraid of disappearing. But once we disappear a little bit, we understand how free and how happy and how joyful, how light, how wonderful it is. You notice it's the same fear as a prisoner who's been in jail for many years. And tomorrow they're being freed. And they don't want to go free because they've got used to being in jail. Or any of the Indonesian youth here will know my books over there were titled The Cacing and the Filthy Love. That was a story about the monk who got reborn as a worm in a pile of cow poo. And his friend tried to get him out of it, but he didn't want to go. Sometimes we're afraid of leaving our filthy pile of cow shit. If you're a worm, that's your home. That's your food. That's what I like. That's a bit gross, confronting, but it's a great simile.
The next question. Even though I can feel peaceful and rested after the meditation session, I still find the mind gets irritated when faced with unpleasant situations. So though the irritations do not last as long as before, I would like to know how should this irritation be handled in daily life?
The irritation in daily life is all because one asks from the world what it can never give you. You can't always get a boss who just is so nice and lovely to you, and you feel a bit tired. Oh, go and take a rest today. And you can't pay your bills. Oh, how much more money? Do you want a raise of salary? And life is irritating. Can you find any place in this world where you can work for a week and it's not irritating? So we're thinking from this world something, and come and ask your fellow workers. You're irritating too. Ask them. Am I irritating? Of course I'm irritating. As soon as I speak, you're irritating too, but in a good way. Life is irritating. So first of all, it's just life. So in other words, we let it go as soon as it arises. Ajahn Charles, it's not the irritation disturbs you, it's you who disturb the irritation.
Okay, the last question for tonight. We're just tying it back to the topic for today's Dhamma talk. So this lady, she's currently pregnant, and she's trying to, and she wants to ask, what can she do to encourage her unborn child to start on the shortcut to Nibbana?
Well, you have to start first, Mum. So it is true that connectedness of human beings. So if you can meditate, but it's not just meditating, be kind, be peaceful, be really gentle. And not push anything, just really relax to the max. Relax to the max. And you may be able to feel your little baby relax to the max. And then you'll probably find, like this one disciple in Perth who told me this, and it freaked her out, but true story, as soon as the baby was born, about two or 3 days afterwards, she was in the hospital, hadn't come out of the hospital yet. No, a natural birth, good birth, but they was just staying a couple of days in hospital just to make sure everything was okay. And she just finished breastfeeding her kid. And after breastfeeding the child crawled on her mother's tummy, crossed its legs in full lotus, put the right hand over the left hand, closed its eyes, and to all intents and purposes was meditating. And it freaked her out. She never expected to see that in a little 2 or 3 days old kid. But that kid, maybe that was on a shortcut to enlightenment.